Deep within the ancient folds of the Appalachian Mountains, where mist clings to towering hardwoods and silence feels older than memory, a single stone has ignited one of America's most unsettling archaeological debates. At first glance, it appears ordinary, a massive rock embedded into the earth, weathered by centuries of wind, rain, and time. But etched into its surface is a mark that refuses explanation, a handprint far larger than any human, bearing 7 elongated, claw-like fingers pressed into solid stone. Local legends claim this is no simple carving. It is said to be the mark of a giant, an enormous being that once walked the Appalachian wilderness long before recorded history. According to regional folklore, this entity was feared, powerful, and deeply tied to the land itself. Some versions describe it as a protector, others as a predator, but nearly all agree on one detail. It was not human. Among Cherokee communities, the stone is considered sacred, passed down through generations. Oral traditions speak of ancient beings that existed before the world settled into balance. These were not gods, but forces, larger than men, bound to the mountains, and capable of leaving lasting marks on a landscape. To many, the stone is not evidence, but memory, a warning etched into the earth. Yet controversy begins when modern researchers enter the story. Some archaeologists argue the carving is symbolic, a stylized representation, rather than a literal impression. Others claim the markings do not match known Native American petroglyph traditions at all. The 7-fingered hand, they argue, appears anatomically unnatural and iconographically foreign. The mystery deepened when forensic geologist Scott Wolter examined the stone. His analysis raised troubling questions. Tool marks suggested deliberate carving, not natural erosion. Weathering patterns hinted at significant age, possibly predating European contact. Most unsettling was Wolter's conclusion that the symbols may not be indigenous in origin. If that is true, then who created them? And why? The Appalachian Mountains are among the oldest on Earth, older than bones, older than forests, older than humanity itself. Civilizations have risen and vanished along their ridges, leaving fragments behind. What if this stone is one of those fragments, a remnant of a chapter in American history that was never written down? Because some stories are not meant to be told. They are meant to be remembered. For the Cherokee people, the Appalachian Mountains are not simply a physical landscape. They are living memory, shaped by ancestors, spirits, and events that stretch far beyond written history. Every river bend, every ridgeline, and every stone carries meaning. The 7-clawed hand stone exists within this sacred geography, and for many Cherokee descendants, its importance cannot be separated from their cultural identity. Cherokee oral traditions speak of an ancient time before harmony fully settled across the land. During this era, powerful beings roamed the mountains, entities that were neither human nor divine, but something in between. These beings were often described as larger than ordinary people, capable of great strength, and deeply connected to the natural world. Some protected balance, while others threatened it. The stories were not told as myths for entertainment, but as lessons meant to preserve memory and survival. Within this context, the stone is understood symbolically. Elders have described markings left by powerful beings as reminders rather than literal impressions. In many indigenous traditions, symbols function on multiple levels at once. A carved hand may represent authority, a territorial boundary, or a moment of transformation rather than a physical act frozen in stone. However, disagreement emerges when outside researchers analyze the artifact. Critics argue that the 7-finger design does not align with known Cherokee artistic conventions. While the number 7 carries spiritual importance in many ancient cultures around the world, it is not a dominant motif in documented Cherokee symbolism. The elongated, claw-like fingers further complicate interpretation, appearing aggressive and animalistic rather than ceremonial. This disagreement has created tension between cultural preservation and academic investigation. Many Cherokee scholars emphasize that not all sacred knowledge was ever shared with outsiders. Colonization disrupted oral transmission, erased elders, and forced silence where explanation once existed. As a result, gaps in understanding do not necessarily indicate fabrication. They may reflect loss. Others within the community acknowledge uncertainty. Some suggest the stone marks a dangerous boundary, warning early people to avoid a specific place. Others believe it commemorates a conflict between humans and a powerful force that no longer exists. A few quietly accept the possibility that the legends may preserve encounters with beings that vanished long ago. What remains undeniable is this: the stone is not just an object, it is a survivor of cultural trauma, memory, and time. The question is no longer whether the Cherokee revere the stone. It is whether modern history is willing to listen without rewriting what it does not understand. At the center of the Appalachian Giant mystery lies the marking itself. A massive hand etched into stone, featuring 7 elongated, claw-like fingers. This single image is a source of endless debate because it defies easy classification. Is it a symbolic carving, or is it meant to represent something that once physically existed? The answer remains elusive, but the questions it raises are impossible to ignore. From a geological standpoint, stone is not a forgiving surface. Creating deep, defined grooves requires sustained pressure or deliberate tools. Natural erosion rarely produces symmetrical, finger-like shapes arranged in such an intentional pattern. Microscopic examinations suggest the lines were carved rather than formed naturally, indicating purposeful design rather than coincidence. Supporters of symbolic interpretation argue that ancient cultures often exaggerated features to convey power. The extra fingers, they claim, may represent dominance, supernatural authority, or spiritual completeness. Across many civilizations, the number 7 has been associated with cosmic order, strength, and transcendence. Under this view, the hand is not anatomical, but emblematic. However, critics of this explanation point to troubling inconsistencies. The proportions of the fingers appear unusually uniform, not stylized. The spacing resembles anatomy more than abstraction. More importantly, the claws taper in a way that suggests function, not symbolism. This detail fuels speculation that the image reflects observation rather than imagination. Human polydactyly does exist, but 7 fully formed, elongated digits on a single hand would be extraordinarily rare. Even in documented cases, additional fingers are typically smaller or malformed. The hand on the stone shows no such irregularities. It appears balanced, deliberate, and complete. Animal tracks fail to provide answers as well. Bears, often suggested as an explanation, leave wide palm impressions with short, curved claws. The stone's carving shows long, straight digits arranged with precision. No known Appalachian animal produces a track resembling this form. This has led some researchers to suggest the unthinkable. The hand may depict a being that no longer exists. A large hominid species, perhaps remembered as a giant, could explain both the folklore and the physical representation. Historical reports of oversized skeletons, though controversial, are often cited in support. In ancient cultures, handprints were frequently used to mark presence, a declaration of existence. If that tradition applies here, then the Appalachian stone is not symbolic art. It is a message, and messages carved in stone are rarely meant to be misunderstood. Long before modern archaeology reached the Appalachian Mountains, stories of giants were already woven into the region's folklore. These accounts did not originate from a single culture or era. Instead, they appear across multiple indigenous traditions, early settler journals, and isolated mountain communities. The consistency of these stories has raised a troubling question. Why would so many unrelated groups describe similar beings in the same landscape? Indigenous legends speak of enormous humanoid figures inhabiting deep forests and cave systems. These beings were often described as hostile, territorial, and dangerous to humans. Some stories depict them as cannibals, while others portray them as ancient guardians driven into the mountains after great conflicts. While details vary, size and strength remain central traits in nearly every account. Early European explorers recorded encounters that echoed these legends. Journals from the 17th and 18th centuries describe unusually large inhabitants feared by surrounding tribes. French traders wrote of great men of the hills who avoided contact and attacked trespassers. These accounts were often dismissed as exaggeration, yet they appear repeatedly in independent sources. Colonial-era newspapers added to the mystery. Throughout the 19th century, reports surfaced describing massive skeletons unearthed during farming, road construction, and mining operations. Many of these discoveries allegedly measured far beyond average human height. Though mainstream archaeology disputes their authenticity, the sheer number of reports suggests something unusual was being encountered. Skeptics argue that giant myths exist in cultures worldwide and therefore hold no evidentiary value. Dragons, cyclopes, and titans, they say, are universal storytelling elements. However, critics of this dismissal note that myths often originate from misunderstood realities. Fossilized remains once inspired legends of monsters. Ancient animals became gods through oral tradition. Memory distorts, but it rarely appears without cause. The Appalachian Mountains offer an ideal environment for isolation. Dense forests, rugged terrain, and extensive cave networks could conceal a population from wider human contact. Even today, vast areas remain unexplored. If an ancient hominid species survived longer in Appalachia than elsewhere, evidence would be sparse and easily lost. The seven-clawed hand stone may represent a rare convergence of legend and artifact, a physical object anchoring intangible stories to a specific place. Rather than folklore inspiring the stone may have inspired the folklore. If that is true, then the legends are not symbolic exaggerations. They are echoes, and echoes only exist when something once made a sound. The Appalachian Giant stone might have remained a regional curiosity if not for the involvement of forensic geologist Scott Wolter. Known for examining controversial artifacts, Wolter approached the stone not as folklore, but as physical evidence. His methods focus on geology, tool marks, and weathering patterns rather than legend, and his conclusions place the artifacts squarely at the center of an archaeological divide. Wolter's analysis suggested the carving was deliberate. The groove showed signs of intentional shaping rather than random erosion. Weathering appeared consistent across the stone, implying significant age. Most notably, Wolter questioned whether the markings could be attributed to Cherokee craftsmanship, citing stylistic differences from known indigenous petroglyphs in the region. This assessment immediately sparked backlash. Critics accused Wolter of dismissing native heritage and imposing alternative narratives onto sacred objects. Supporters countered that questioning authorship does not equate to cultural erasure. Instead, they argued, it invites deeper investigation into a past that may be more complex than a single explanation allows. The controversy exposed a long-standing tension within archaeology. Cultural respect is essential, yet scientific inquiry demands evidence-based evaluation. When an artifact is both sacred and unexplained, it occupies a fragile space where questions themselves become controversial. Wolter's work forced that discomfort into the open. Wolter also raised the possibility of pre-Columbian transoceanic contact. Throughout North America, anomalous carvings, inscriptions, and artifacts have fueled speculation that ancient visitors reached the continent long before Columbus. If such contact occurred, the Appalachian stone could represent an interaction later absorbed into indigenous oral tradition. Importantly, Wolter stopped short of definitive claims. He did not declare giants real or civilizations lost. Instead, he emphasized uncertainty. The artifact, he argued, does not fit neatly into established categories, and dismissing it prematurely would be unscientific. Yet uncertainty is often more threatening than falsehood. Academic institutions rely on stable timelines and accepted frameworks. Anomalies challenge funding, reputation, and consensus. As a result, artifacts like the Appalachian Giant stone often receive limited study, remaining suspended between curiosity and taboo. Wolter's involvement did not solve the mystery. It intensified it. By questioning what others accepted, he forced a larger question into the conversation. Is archaeology about preserving answers, or about confronting the questions that refuse to disappear? The stone, unmoved by debate, remains where it has always been, waiting. Despite decades of speculation, scientific analysis of the Appalachian Giant stone remains surprisingly limited. No large-scale, peer-reviewed excavation has ever been conducted at the site. Cultural sensitivity, land protection laws, and academic hesitation have all contributed to this absence of definitive study. As a result, the stone exists in a scientific gray zone, where questions outnumber answers and certainty remains elusive. From a geological perspective, several observations can be made with confidence. The stone itself is ancient, shaped by natural forces over thousands of years. The carved grooves exhibit weathering consistent with long-term exposure, suggesting they were not created in recent centuries. Importantly, the erosion appears uniform, meaning the carving and surrounding surface have aged together. This detail challenges claims of modern fabrication. Petroglyph specialists remain divided. Some argue the hand fits within a broader tradition of North American rock art, where symbolic forms were carved into stone to mark sacred spaces. Others counter that the precision of the carving is unusual. The depth, symmetry, and anatomical consistency suggest deliberate planning rather than spontaneous ritual expression. Dating the carving directly presents challenges. Stone cannot be carbon dated, and without organic material embedded within the grooves, estimates rely on indirect methods. Lichen growth, mineral deposition, and erosion rates offer clues, but none provide exact timelines. This uncertainty has allowed both skeptics and believers to interpret the data in ways that support their positions. What science cannot do is confirm the existence of giants. No verified skeletal remains associated with the stone have been recovered. No DNA tools or habitation sites have been conclusively linked to a non-human hominid species in Appalachia. These absences are frequently cited as proof that the legend must be symbolic rather than literal. Yet science also cannot disprove the stone's significance. The carving is intentional, it is old, and it does not conform neatly to established categories. In archaeology, anomalies are not errors. They are invitations. History has shown that accepted timelines change when new evidence emerges. Entire civilizations were once dismissed as myth until ruins force recognition. What was once impossible becomes inevitable in hindsight. The Appalachian Giant stone occupies that uncomfortable threshold. It offers just enough evidence to resist dismissal, but not enough to deliver closure. Science demands patience. Stone demands endurance. And sometimes what cannot yet be proven still deserves to be taken seriously. One of the most troubling aspects of the Appalachian Giant stone is not what has been said about it, but what has not. Despite its age, complexity, and cultural significance, the artifact remains largely absent from academic journals, university research projects, and mainstream archaeological discourse. This silence has led many to question whether the issue is lack of evidence or lack of willingness. Archaeology, like all sciences, operates within institutions. These institutions rely on funding, peer approval, and established frameworks. Discoveries that fit existing models are welcomed. Those that challenge them often face resistance. Artifacts associated with giants, lost civilizations, or anomalous beings fall into a category considered professionally dangerous. Studying them risks credibility, grants, and careers. Throughout history, controversial findings have frequently been dismissed before they were examined. Reports of oversized skeletons in 19th century America were labeled hoaxes without investigation. Unusual carvings were attributed to imagination or fraud. Over time, these dismissals became institutional memory, discouraging future inquiry. The Appalachian Giant stone exists within this pattern. It is protected, sacred, and politically sensitive. Excavation risks accusations of cultural disrespect. Interpretation risks academic backlash. As a result, the safest path is avoidance. The stone remains acknowledged, but unexplored. This silence creates a paradox. Without research, critics claim there is no evidence. Without evidence, research is denied. The cycle sustains itself, leaving the artifact suspended in uncertainty. Meanwhile, public curiosity grows, fueled by folklore documentaries and alternative researchers willing to step outside academic boundaries. Some scholars argue that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. This principle is sound, but it is often applied unevenly. Extraordinary dismissals also require evidence. Ignoring an artifact does not invalidate it. Silence is not a conclusion. Indigenous voices further complicate the issue. Many argue that academic silence mirrors historical erasure. When native knowledge contradicts Western frameworks, it has often been labeled myth. The reluctance to investigate the stone may reflect lingering discomfort with acknowledging histories that were never written down. Forbidden history does not always involve conspiracy. More often, it emerges from caution, fear, and professional survival. The result, however, is the same. Questions remain unanswered, and artifacts remain unexplained. The Appalachian Giant stone does not demand belief. It demands attention. And until it receives that attention, the silence surrounding it will speak louder than any conclusion ever could. As mainstream archaeology hesitates, alternative theories rush to fill the silence surrounding the Appalachian Giant stone. Some of these ideas push far beyond conventional explanations, entering territory many scholars refuse to approach. While critics dismiss them as speculative, their persistence reflects a deeper issue. Unanswered evidence invites uncomfortable possibilities. One theory proposes the stone as evidence of a lost civilization that predates known indigenous cultures. Advocates argue that ancient societies may have risen and fallen in North America long before recorded history, leaving behind isolated artifacts later absorbed into oral tradition. Under this view, the seven-clawed hand represents a symbolic language now forgotten, its meaning fragmented by time and cultural collapse. Others suggest the carving reflects an extinct hominid species. Anthropology confirms that multiple human-like species once coexisted on Earth. Some were larger, stronger, and adapted to specific environments. If such a species survived longer in isolated regions like Appalachia, it could explain both the legends and the anomalous handprint. Over generations, encounters with these beings may have transformed into stories of giants. A more controversial interpretation ventures into non-human intelligence. Proponents point to the unusual anatomy of the hand, arguing it does not align with known human variation. They suggest the stone records contact with beings not native to Earth, or at least not native to human evolution. While no physical evidence supports this claim, the theory persists largely because no explanation has conclusively ruled it out. Skeptics argue that extraordinary claims distract from rational inquiry. Yet rational inquiry depends on data, and the lack of thorough investigation leaves room for speculation. When science refuses to engage, imagination steps in. The problem is not that alternative theories exist, but that they flourish in the absence of authoritative study. Psychologically, humans seek patterns. When artifacts resist explanation, the mind reaches for narratives that restore meaning. Giants, lost civilizations, and visitors from afar serve that purpose. They may not be true, but they reveal discomfort with uncertainty. The Appalachian Giant stone stands at the intersection of evidence and imagination. It does not confirm alternative theories, but it does not silence them either. Each interpretation reflects an attempt to explain something that does not fit. Perhaps the most uncomfortable possibility is this. The truth may be simpler, stranger, or more mundane than any theory allows. Until the stone is fully studied, every explanation remains provisional, and in that uncertainty, belief and skepticism coexist, uneasily but inevitably. What if the Appalachian Giant was more than legend? What if the stories passed down through Cherokee and Appalachian communities are echoes of an event or existence that modern science has yet to recognize? Asking this question forces us to confront uncomfortable possibilities about history, biology, and culture. If a species of giant hominids once walked these mountains, the implications would be profound. Human history would require revision. Archaeology would need to acknowledge gaps where physical evidence has vanished or been ignored. Folklore would shift from myth to memory, validating centuries of oral tradition and storytelling. Legends that were once dismissed as exaggeration might instead preserve ancient truth. Skeletal evidence remains elusive. No verified bones linked to giants have survived the centuries intact, and many 19th century reports were dismissed or lost. Mainstream archaeology explains this absence by citing improbable preservation, misinterpretation, or fabrication. Yet across multiple states, from West Virginia to North Carolina, independent accounts consistently describe remains far larger than modern humans. Even if exaggerated, the consistency raises questions. Additionally, the stone itself presents a tangible mystery. Its deep grooves, elongated fingers, and claw-like appearance do not align neatly with known human anatomy or regional indigenous artistic patterns. The handprint's presence in a remote, sacred location suggests it was deliberately placed to endure. In essence, the artifact could be a form of record-keeping, a memorial of an event too significant to forget. If the legends are literal, then they carry lessons about survival, conflict, and coexistence with extraordinary beings. Many Cherokee stories caution against venturing too far into certain areas, attributing danger to beings larger than men. These warnings may have been inspired by real encounters, encoded into cultural memory for protection. Even alternative theories, lost civilizations, pre-Columbian visitors, or other species, gain traction if we accept that the Appalachian Mountains once held unknown beings. Every theory converges on a single truth. The stone represents something anomalous, something worth preserving in memory. This possibility forces reflection beyond archaeology. It challenges assumptions about human dominance, recorded history, and the limits of evidence. Perhaps our understanding of the past is incomplete not because artifacts are absent, but because we have ignored the lessons embedded in landscape, story, and stone. Belief is not required. Respect for mystery, attention to evidence, and willingness to question accepted timelines are. If the legend of the Appalachian Giant is true, even partially, then the stone is more than artifact. It is a witness, a claim, and a reminder that history may be stranger than textbooks admit. The Appalachian Giant stone does not ask for belief. It does not demand proof. It simply exists, silent, weathered, and enduring, carved with a hand that refuses to be ignored. Across centuries, it has witnessed the passage of generations, survived the erosion of culture, and resisted the interpretations of outsiders. Its very presence challenges assumptions about history, memory, and human understanding. To some, the stone is sacred, a physical manifestation of stories that connect Cherokee descendants to the land and their ancestors. To others, it is an anomaly, a mystery defying mainstream archaeology. In both cases, the artifact forces reflection on what it means to preserve knowledge and how easily evidence can be dismissed when it does not conform to conventional frameworks. The debate surrounding the seven-clawed hand is more than academic. It touches on ethics, cultural respect, and the limits of inquiry. Scholars hesitate because challenging accepted timelines is risky. Indigenous voices demand reverence, insisting that artifacts must be understood within their proper cultural context. Meanwhile, amateur researchers and alternative historians insist on investigation, arguing that ignoring anomalies suppresses truth. The stone occupies a liminal space between legend and evidence. Its grooves are intentional, precise, and ancient. Its hand is unlike any known human or animal pattern. Its location within the Appalachian landscape is both remote and sacred. These details create a tension. If it is symbolic, it is a masterful work of memory and warning. If it is literal, it may be the last trace of beings that existed long before recorded history. Science can offer clues, but it cannot yet provide certainty. Weathering patterns, tool marks, and geological context suggest great age. Petroglyph analysis highlights its uniqueness. Yet definitive proof of the Appalachian Giant, or any being behind the carving, remains elusive. The stone is a question carved in stone, resisting simple answers. Perhaps that is its true power. The artifact forces us to accept uncertainty, to question authority, and to listen carefully to the past, even when it does not speak in a language we fully understand. Some mysteries are not solved. They are preserved, enduring across time and memory. The Appalachian Giant stone is more than a carving. It is a witness. It is a record. It is a challenge to the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, where we came from, and what we have yet to discover. And in the quiet of the mountains, it continues to speak, if we are willing to listen. Do you believe the legends of the Appalachian Giant? Could this stone be evidence of something lost to time, or merely folklore? Comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more unsolved mysteries and hidden histories from the Crit Stories.